Hey everyone, this is Mr. Franzen. Bishop Brossard High School's Seek and Find ministry is a ministry aimed to seek students where they are in their faith and help them find Jesus in their life. We do this by providing faith-based media content and learning opportunities to help students deepen their faith. Right now, we are in the middle of releasing episodes of our series recapping the TV show The Chosen. I have guests such as Mr. Zengel, Mrs. Hensley and her husband Jacob, as well as Miss Tallarigo. While we created this content with Brossard students in mind, adults will also relate to all of it. We recorded these episodes in 3 big individual sessions, but I've edited them into individual episodes. I recommend watching the season of The Chosen first, and then come back and enjoy the recap episodes. Now let's go ahead and get to the next episode. Thanks for listening. All right, so let's move on to episode 2. Episode 2 is titled Shabbat. Here, I think we're introduced in episode 1 to Simon and Andrew and a little bit of their story, but it really starts to take more shape, if I recall correctly, in episode 2. So this is also something that you don't really see in Scripture, but the way they're portraying it is stuff that real people are going through. So Simon is married, which that is in Scripture, but Simon, who becomes Peter, is married, and him and Andrew are going through some stuff together. So they're struggling financially. They've come up with these unique ways to make money, such as pretending to fight and try to gamble their way into making some money, even trying to fix the fights. There's this great scene of Simon fighting his brother-in-laws, and Andrew's in the back working bets, trying to win some money off these guys, and they wind up losing in the end. And so there's a scene where both of them are just staring at their fishing boat just overlooking the Sea of Galilee, like, all right, I guess we got to go fishing. And Andrew's like, you can't go fishing, it's Shabbat, which is, for those who don't know, it's basically like keeping the Sabbath. You shouldn't be working on the Sabbath. You should keep it the Lord's Day. So they typically don't go fishing and making money on the Sabbath. They spend time with their families. But
which is reiterated by society in that they don't have to pay taxes on that day. Correct. So every other day of the week they must pay taxes in some form.
Correct. So I don't really remember all the high moments from this. I just remember that Peter, and this is where I sort of remind myself that I sort of superimpose my own life into Peter. So Peter is digging himself a hole, along with Andrew, but Peter's approach to it, I shouldn't say Peter, he's not Peter yet, he's Simon. Simon's approach is to try to just solve it himself. And he's going through financial troubles. There's a quote in here, the best quote, where is it? It was on this. I don't know, one of my study guides. It was a quote from Simon to his wife, who's named Eden. I don't think we know her name in Scripture, but he keeps telling her he's got this. And so he keeps trying it his way. He's a faithful dude. He is all into his faith. He knows Scripture. He knows the Messiah is coming. But he's just trying to tackle life. He's got hatred for Samaritans. He's got hatred for the Romans. So he's, a microcosm of what a lot of people felt at that time. But
still today.
Yes, correct. And he's trying to do it himself, however that is, whether it's gambling, whether it's negotiating a deal, which he does with a pretty important character named Gaius. And, Mr. Zengel's going to have to drink some sugar or eat some sugar.
No, it's hot the other way.
Oh, okay. Well, what do we got to do? Sweat? Do we got to run?
Get
a little jog in.
Push a button. I'm above jogging.
So we meet Gaius. Gaius is the Roman centurion who's in charge of this. What city are they in?
Capernaum.
Capernaum, that's right.
Capernaum.
And Gaius is basically, I don't know, I'm struggling to explain because we also meet Matthew in this moment too. So we've got Peter who's struggling, who's trying to, come up with money. Fishing's not working. He's not catching any fish. So he works out this deal. He finds out some other Jews are fishing, and he basically, behind the scenes, negotiates this deal with Gaius that he'll turn these guys in if he forgives him of, the tax money stuff. So we meet Matthew, and I'm going to let you guys talk about Matthew, because Matthew's portrayed in a different way than I ever would have thought just reading his gospel, which I think that's the cool thing about this too, is I read the gospels and I focus on who the people are in the story, and I don't think about the people who actually were influenced that wrote these. So talk about Matthew and how he's portrayed right from the beginning and what you thought.
I just got a big heart for Matthew. Oh, I love Matthew. I honestly don't know that I remember first meeting him, though. I mean,
Did you know it was him? Because he's, portrayed, in his house. He's, getting himself ready for work that day.
I think in episode 1, we see him...
I was going to say, I thought he was in
a couple little blips. We see him trying to get to the market, and he has to get someone to hide him in the back of a wagon. So we meet this interesting character, but we really don't know. It kind of hints at who he is, but you might not know yet.
Right.
I think the reason we love Matthew is because we're teachers.
That's right, yep.
And Matthew is just a different type of kid, different student. He's that one kid that we fall in love with who maybe the other kids in the room don't look at the same way as their buddies or their friends. But there's just something about him. As a teacher, you can see this kid is unique. This kid doesn't care about being unique. This kid looks at the world differently. But this kid has got it. They know what they're doing. Right. And it's a blessing when young people aren't afraid to do what they know is right or wrong and to not care what society thinks of them. And that's Matthew. That's why it's beautiful.
He's also portrayed, and this is the writers of the director of the show did this. I don't remember why they said they wanted to do it this way, but they portray him as being somewhere on the autism spectrum.
Yeah.
But you can also tell, so even though Matthew is loved by us and we can see him being ostracized at times he was also a tax collector who at that time, he is all about doing his job right, and he's going to collect your money, and he's not going to have sympathy for you. You pay because he's working for the Romans. So you can also see why he was disliked.
Right.
Because, he comes across as sort of I don't know, high tea, first class. He's got 1 million pairs of sandals when everybody else barely has sandals to wear.
Yeah,
he's got a nice house. Yes, he's
going through his closet when every outfit is exactly the same. He's trying to choose which one. You're like, what the heck is this?
So he's portrayed as being sort of higher than everybody else, but he's also when he eventually sees that his world doesn't match the world of everybody else, which that's a later episode. I don't want to get ahead of myself. He is willing to change on a dime.
Right.
But I like that they show him fixated on numbers, and he is smart, he's intelligent, he's accurate. He can tell how much money's in a pouch by just weighing it in his hand. And there's an interaction with I don't know if it's I think it is in this episode, because Andrew and Simon are at the tax collector booth, and Andrew's trying to figure out that if he can pay. He goes, well, I have this much money. And Matthew's basically well, he's doing all these calculations in his head, a 60% penalty for late and all this stuff. And he's like, this isn't even enough to cover the penalty. And Andrew's just I don't know what to do. And Simon swoops in as he does and is don't worry, I got this. And he tells Matthew at this point of his agreement with Gaius. And you can tell Matthew's Gaius, because Gaius is his boss, essentially. And it is Gaius, right? I am saying the right one. Or is Gaius the other guy?
No, I think Gaius is Matthew's guard.
Yeah.
Quintus.
I was saying Gaius the whole time.
Quintus. They're both Romans. Come on.
Yes, right. So, anyways, he's got to deal with Quintus, and so Matthew says, I'm going to verify this and whatever. And he does. He goes and verifies it, and Quintus then sets him up to be a spy for Peter to make sure, because he doesn't know if he can trust him. I keep switching Simon and Peter's name.
Which, again, if we think about those, and I'm sorry for the teacher coming out again, but those kids who are a little bit different, sometimes they're used by the other students. And Quintus is using Matthew.
100%.
Because Matthew not only can do it, won't care about doing it, but he'll get away with it, and people just think he's different and weird. So it's no big deal to see him spying on someone or standing in a corner looking at someone or taking notes, which is sad, but we have a lot of students like that. A little bit different, and people use them to their advantage.
Yeah, I agree. But what's really cool to me, and this is also something I didn't think about. I didn't think about what were the potential beefs amongst the apostles. That's another thing this
Whole
series
show. Yeah.
does a great job of. There's so many times where Jesus isn't around where they all just start bickering and fighting about things. And it's like, sounds like humans.
Yeah.
But then when Jesus comes back, if you keep Jesus in the middle of everything, it's like, oh, okay, well, let's just do what he says.
Yeah.
There is another moment in this episode where I believe, based on this quote I see from episode 2, where Nicodemus and Mary have a conversation. Is that right?
Yes.
So one of the Sanhedrin recognizes that Mary's been healed, and they're like, she's not the same, and they go talk to Nicodemus, and Nicodemus wants to investigate it. So he finds her, and he starts asking her questions, and Mary doesn't really even know what's happened. And this is the quote from her. She says, "I don't understand it myself. I was one way, and now I'm completely different. And the thing that happened in between was him. So yes, I will know him for the rest of my life."
Cue the in-between song.
Yes.
Yeah, cue the song.
It's a great song.
And she doesn't know Jesus' name yet.
No.
So that's what the question was about. Which, I don't know. When I first saw that, I assume at the end of episode 1, with the beautiful music in the background, those two talked into the night and had drinks.
Exactly.
But that's not what happened.
He just hugged her and said, "Go.
Yeah.
Sin no more," probably.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Because that's what he tends to do.
right.
So we're kind of left with a lot of questions at this point. So this episode ends with, I believe Simon has he gone out yet?
Yeah, so he started Shabbat with Andrew and Eden, but he
Okay.
got up in the middle of the meal and left.
Okay,
So
that's right.
So the episode's called Shabbat,
Yeah.
and there's 3 different feasts going on simultaneously that we can see. So there's the Sanhedrin and the wealthier people with Nicodemus.
Yes.
And then there's Eden and Andrew and Simon, which is an intimate, tiny, little, beautiful one, which is amazing to think that families with just 2 people would have done this. I mean, that's what gives me the chills, is just think about every household would have been doing this, right? And then Mary is the ultimate one, where
Correct.
she is hosting Shabbat for the first time in a long time, and she, of course, doesn't have any family. But her is the island of misfit toys that show
Correct.
up or whatever with her.
We
And the-
see Matthew eating a lemon, too.
Oh, that's right. This is
Yeah.
actually 4.
Yeah.
Because he goes to his
Forgot about
parent. He
that.
tries to go to his parents' house.
Yeah.
Right.
And turns around and eats with the dog.
Yeah.
That's right. I forgot about that.
Yeah. I
So,
know.
and then in that one that Mary's hosting, she's all nervous because she hasn't done this in
Right.
years.
And she's written down the words and
Right.
everything.
And Jesus, I think it's implied that he asked, because this is also one thing that's interesting, because in Scripture you see Simon and
Yeah.
Andrew are the first 2 called, but it appears little James and Thaddeus are
Thaddeus.
already
Already followers.
followers. And who cares if that's true or not? Like, this is just the way they probably didn't know how to introduce them,
Or
because
they had to, yeah, that's a way of bringing in those characters.
yeah, so they are at Mary's place for Shabbat, and you don't find out until later when they're having a conversation that they didn't really know each other.
Right.
Jesus just told us to show up, and Jesus knocks on the door, and Mary and is like, "Can I come in?"
Right.
And invites himself to her Shabbat, which is a cool moment too. I'm trying to think if there was anything else. Oh, what did you think about, so we got introduced to Andrew a lot too. What did you think of his character in general? To me, Andrew appears a lot like, I don't know, a quote unquote, this probably isn't the right way to say it, but like a normal person. He's not like too high or too low on anything. He's sort of just even keeled. He's kind of a jokester. He's compassionate, but also he laughs a lot. I don't know. I don't know how to explain how I feel about Andrew. I really like him, but
It always comes back to the teacher mode or classroom for me. How I
It's
group
okay.
these characters. Andrew is that really good kid who you can get them to do anything, but they're a follower,
yes.
right? They're not really going to lead,
Mm-hmm.
but they're such a good number 2 or number 3.
Right.
So Andrew just, in my mind, seems like he's always looking on who to follow. but he's passionate about it.
Yeah.
And he perhaps, I deal with younger students, so sometimes you get the middle school, 6th grade, and you got kids who are right on the edge, and they can go one way or the other. They can start hanging out with the kids you don't want them to, or they can hang out with the good ones. That's Andrew.
Mm-hmm.
And Andrew doesn't know where to go. So he's hanging out with John the Baptist, we're introduced.
That's right.
So he wants that strong faith in his life. He's also really following Peter, who he knows is leading him down the wrong way because they're doing these shady gambling deals that are falling through and all kinds of stuff. He has no family of his own, so he has to have Shabbat with his brother and sister-in-law. He just seems like that kid in the middle to me. But he's great. I love his character.
Right.
Yeah, as we go on, I feel like he's a good hype man. Like he's
Yeah.
always there for Simon. He's always there, like hyping him up.
Right.
He's there for John the Baptist.
He hypes
too.
up John
Yeah,
the Baptist. Yeah, you're right. He is a good hype man.
That's a good point.
He's passionate. Yeah.
There are some characters that have sort of changed actors, which has made it hard because like one of them, I don't think we've met him yet at this point, but Philip is one who changes characters.
Right.
And once the actor changed, it was like, you're a completely different person.
Yeah.
But another couple characters that we meet briefly are James and John, the Sons of Thunder. They have a more culminating episode later down the road. But you can see that they're portrayed as having a history with Simon. They've known Simon and Andrew their whole life.
Right.
They've sort of been friendly rivals in a way.
Yeah.
But they become huge characters, obviously.
Right.
So we get to meet them, and eventually, they discover Simon's plan because Simon has to tell them, basically, because I don't remember if it was the Shabbat night or if it's episode 3. Which night does he actually go out and he finds their bobbers out in the lake? I can't remember.
I think it's 3.
Is it 3? All right, well, we'll talk about that in a moment. But you get to meet all these different characters. So we've met Jesus, Matthew, James, John, Andrew, Simon, Nicodemus. I think briefly we've met John the Baptist. Real quick edit, sorry for the interruption. I wanted to let you know what I'm about to talk about actually doesn't happen in episode 2. It happens in a later episode. It doesn't really ruin anything dramatic, so you can keep listening. But, one of the things we did was record all of this over, couple hour stretch, and we were going off a lot off of notes and memory, and some of the episodes can kind of blend in together. So it's easy to blend the episodes when I don't watch one episode then record the podcast. We watched all of them and then recorded all of these together, and I just edited them to make them shorter. So back to the episode. I love Simon calls him Creepy John.
Creepy or Crazy John. He keeps going back, Crazy John.
Yeah.
Creepy John.
And the end of this episode, when Nicodemus is having that conversation with him, asking him about miracles, like something was said right at the end, and John the Baptist comes into the light, and he's just got that creepy smile, like, oh, it's coming. Jesus is doing stuff now. He's been waiting his whole life for it.
That's another character that I don't know that I ever would have thought him as that creepy.
Mm-hmm.
No. But what I like about it is he does not waver one bit in his faith.
No.
And sometimes when you are on fire for your faith and you portray that in normal interactions, people look at you as crazy. I know for a fact people look at me as crazy sometimes. Even the people I love the most.
Crazy.
Yeah, he's crazy.
No.
I am crazy.
Crazy. You can't see his eyes right now, but he's creepy.
I mean, nobody's crazier than Mr. Zengel. But
So I think society, though, it's weird. When I went back and watched this episode a week ago, Simon, did Simon ever meet John the Baptist? From what we learned, he never had an interaction with him.
that's a good point. It was always Andrew going and seeing him and then coming back.
The way I read this, like in my mind, I was like, I didn't pick up on that before. But then I was like, oh, this is so smart by the producers and the directors. This is our society where we're canceling people we've never interacted with. We read something online, we automatically believe it's true. Mm-hmm. So he hears people talk about John the Baptist, and he hears people talk in two different ways. Either he's this creepy, crazy guy out in the desert, or he come back like his brother, and they're in love with him. And Peter automatically assumes the worst, which is what we do as humans, which is pitiful, but that's where we are.
Right.
We just jump on the bandwagon and say, get rid of them. Or, oh my gosh, you might have to cut this. Somebody brought up faith in a graduation thing, and they're not gonna graduate, which is all a lie.
Right.
We just jump on the false thing because it seems like the right thing to do at the time.
Right.
And that's the way I think Peter is calling him creepy. I don't think Peter ever met him.
Right.
He's just calling him creepy because that's what people are saying.
Right. That's a good point. I love that. I think that wraps up episode 2. Thank you for listening to this episode of the BBHS Seek and Find podcast. If you like what you heard, please like and share with a friend. Be sure to subscribe to all of our social media. You can follow us on Instagram and YouTube at BBHS.SeekandFind. You can also follow us on Facebook at Bishop Russer High School Seek and Find Ministry. Once again, thanks for listening, and may God bless you today.